We begin our year with software engineer Piyush Khopkar, whose involvement with NASA's MOXIE project made possible the first artificial generation of oxygen on Mars. Needless to say, this represents a long-term commitment to the eventual human presence on the red planet. Piyush holds an MS degree from the University of Missouri, Columbia in electrical and computer engineering. While enjoying public outreach, he is also becoming involved with two additional NASA projects, one of which is the July 2028 launch of the Dragonfly mission. Its design will be the study of the atmosphere of Titan, one of Saturn's popular moons. It has been long believed that its atmosphere is not unlike that of what was the primordial Earth. And the second mission he's involved with is named Eve and is designated for launch in 2031 to study likewise the atmosphere of Venus. However, with what is to be a very creative design in balloon technology. Although Piyush has some very busy work ahead of him, we do appreciate his being with us this evening. So please give him a very warm welcome. Piyush? Okay.
We don't hear you, Piyush.
Hello?
Hello.
Yep.
Now we hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me
Yep.
now?
Loud and clear.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Pat and everyone for having me. Let me share my screen. All right. If I can. From start and okay. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
See it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
How about now? Can you see my screen?
I don't see it.
Oh, okay. Let me try again. Yeah. Okay, how about now? And then it says it's trying.
No.
No. Oh.
Let's see.
About that. Let's see.
I did. I don't know if do you have the share button? Because you should have it.
Yeah, I see the share button.
Okay.
How about now? I actually just shared the window.
No. Let me see.
Let me see. Yeah, I'm actually sharing it. It says that it is sharing my screen, and I do see stop sharing, but then that suddenly goes away, and then I again see share. Yeah.
Yeah, when you try to go to the share, it does give lots of options for which screen it wants, and I think I got lucky and hit the right one this time.
Yeah, I actually did the entire screen.
Mm-hmm.
How about now? You still cannot see my screen, right?
We can just see you.
What if
Yes,
you
it
change your view on the upper right? Would that do anything? Change the view? I don't know.
Speaker.
I mean, just to try something different.
Trying to think what we could do.
Uh,
If
let's try one more time.
Maybe what about logging out and logging back in or something like that?
yeah, I was thinking that.
I can try that. Actually, I can try leaving and rejoining the meeting.
Sure.
Yep. Goodbye.
We'll hum while you're doing that.
Intermission.
Sounds like a Monty Python movie.
I always want to play the music from Monty Python. I was thinking the same
you
thing.
should go, yeah.
Something on hand.
Yeah, I got to see Spam a lot at the recently renamed building in Washington, D.C. 2 weekends ago. I was going to take a picture, but I thought my daughter would be very upset. We will not speak of it. The show was great. Terribly tacky.
All right, let's try again.
Ah,
Did it work?
oh, it's
Oops,
starting to
it's
look good.
trying.
Yeah, now it says that you are sharing your screen.
All right.
And can you see the slides now?
Yay.
Yeah, see something.
Yes.
Okay,
All right,
yeah,
perfect.
now start your slideshow, and it looks like it'll
All
probably
right.
take the whole screen, hopefully.
All right.
How about now?
Yes.
There we
That's
go.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't see any one of you, but I think that's okay. So we'll just go with whatever setup we have right now. So hi, everyone. My name is Piyush. Thank you so much for having me here. So I'm a software engineer. I work at MathWorks here in Natick, Massachusetts. So today I'm basically going to be talking about MOXIE, an instrument that basically made oxygen on Mars. You know what? I'm so sorry. Let me just try to see if I can see you guys as well, because that is actually making me nervous because I don't see anyone of you. And if not, then I think we'll just.
Yeah, don't mess with it too much. We'll yell at you if we
Okay,
can't.
that's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But if
So.
you hear from us, it means it's good.
All right. So yeah. So today, well, again, like as I said, like thank you so much for having me here. I work at MathWorks as a software engineer. I'm also part of Solar System Ambassadors program. It's run by the NASA JPL. So basically, it's hundreds of volunteers across the country who shares the excitement of space exploration with everyone. And in the MOXIE program, I worked as a technical staff and as an operations engineer. Um, Thank you so much, Pat, for giving a brief introduction about me. Just one thing I would like to just clarify over there. So the EV mission, the one you mentioned, so that's basically, I do have like few resources which I'll share at the end. So the EV, it's a concept study. So basically, there is no like real program or like there is no real mission that would basically fly as of now. But again, like for the EV, the idea is to basically use MOXIE for exploration of Venus. So I'll share more links on that later. And feel free to stop me. We'll make it as like interactive as much as possible. So feel free to just stop me whenever you have any questions. All right. So with that, so here's the outline of my talk. So I thought I'll first give a quick overview of the Mars 2020 mission, like what the mission is about, what are the main goals. And then we'll jump right onto MOXIE. How does MOXIE work? how we operated MOXIE on Mars. And then I have a chart which kind of lists all of the runs we did, and then what was the how much oxygen we made, and then all on that, and then I'll share some resources at the end. All right. So let's start with overview of the Mars 2020 mission. So historically, there have been like a lot of Mars exploration missions. Like there have been like orbiters, landers, and the idea from every Mars missions since like basically starting from the beginning was basically learning something and then building on top of what we have already learned. Uh, so as I said, like past Mars missions have followed the water, built on each other's knowledge and discoveries. Um, and from the past Mars mission, we know that there's plenty of evidence that water basically flowed on Mars in past. And then we knew that the planet was wet and habitable, and Mars had all the basic building blocks of life, which still exist on the surface today. But what we want to answer the question from the Mars 2020 mission or Perseverance mission was, did Mars ever had life? Um, these are overall goals of the like very high level goals of the Mars 2020 mission, or I mean, like I keep calling Mars 2020 mission because that's what we kind of have been like used to just say. But like the goals of Perseverance mission was two parts, like ancient microbial life, as I mentioned. So it had like three objectives: geology, astrobiology, and sample caching. So where sample caching, basically the rover collected the samples and then it put it in the tube and then it dropped the tube on the ground. What happens to those caching samples? That's a very open-ended question right now. And then the second part was human life. So basically preparing for humans. So, and MOXIE was part of the human life aspect of basically really preparing for humans. This is where the rover landed. So, and landed at the Jezero crater, and that's the white here. That's the landing ellipse. All right. So now let's start the main part, which is talking about MOXIE. So basically, the overall idea of MOXIE is, as I mentioned, like preparing for human missions, right? So when we are talking about preparing for human missions, basically we are talking about sending humans to Mars. Now the thing is, there are two main things of sending humans to Mars. Or I would say like there are two main challenges. One is when we send humans to Mars, we need to bring the astronauts back as well, right? So I mean, like, so basically said, let's send people to Mars and then bring them home as well. So the thing is, when you want to send someone to Mars and then bringing them home, basically what you need is a vehicle, right? That is basically going to bring the humans or astronauts from Mars to Earth. When we have a rocket or an asset vehicle in this case, we don't realize that we need a fuel that will basically burn. I mean, like we need a fuel that is basically going to bring the people back to Earth. To burn the fuel, we need oxygen as well. Like on here on Earth, oxygen is like free. It's just available, and we don't realize it. But that's the main that's the main part here is like sending propellant to Mars is very expensive. So let's say if you want to send a crew of 4 people to Mars and then we need to bring them home, then we will just need like the LOX basically stands for liquid oxygen here. So like approximately $1 billion worth of just liquid oxygen just to basically send liquid oxygen for 1 MeV to Mars. And of course, like we will need oxygen for life support system. And that's where basically MOXIE comes into picture. So MOXIE stands for Mars Oxygen ISRU Experiment. ISRU stands for In Situ Resource Utilization. In a very simpler terms, basically, let's say you go for camping and you basically forgot to, like bring firewood with you. Then what you would do is you would basically just hunt for the firewood, and then basically just you would use that then and there to like just do the bonfire. So the overall idea is you basically using one resource to create another resource on a planetary surface. So Martian atmosphere has basically approximately 98% carbon dioxide. So one idea is we can, I mean, like there are multiple ways we can kind of theoretically we can make oxygen on Mars. So one idea is we can basically take that carbon dioxide and split that into carbon and oxygen, and then basically produce oxygen using that carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere. And that's what basically we are doing in MOXIE. So MOXIE instrument is basically situated inside the belly of the rover. It's on the right side, and basically that's what we do. So here's the close up or like a blown out view of MOXIE subsystem. So there are three main parts. One is SOXY, one is the scroll compressor, and then this is the sensor panel, or we can basically see it here. So motor, scroll compressor, and solid oxide electrolysis. So it's in terms of dimensions, it's about the size of a car-size battery. It weighs around like 14.14 pound, approximately 14 pounds on Mars. It requires 300 watts of power. Keep this in mind because I'm gonna bring one, or I'm gonna share one thing when we are while how we operated MOXIE, and this is very important part over there. Operation time is approximately 4 hours. So the way, all in all, the way it works is we have the motor and we have the scroll compressor. So the idea is we take carbon dioxide from Martian atmosphere, we filter all the gases which we don't need, and then we pass the gas to the solid oxide electrolysis assembly. That basically, it's nothing, in very simpler terms, it's nothing but a cell, and that basically does the chemical reaction, and then it splits carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide and oxygen. So this is how basically the process takes place. So it has 3 steps. One, when we start, turn on MOXIE. So basically the instructions goes like turn on MOXIE, and then we heat the SOXY or the cells 200 to 800 degrees Celsius. And that is the major part, because we need to heat the entire system to 800 degrees Celsius, and that basically takes the major part of like after the 4-hour cycle. Once the temperature of the cells reaches 800 degrees Celsius, then we start collecting the thin carbon dioxide. It filters and compresses using the scroll pump, and then the compressed carbon dioxide is passed to SOXY to produce oxygen, and that basically does the that splits between carbon monoxide and oxygen. Now, carbon monoxide in this case, it's we want to make sure that we are not making as like a lot of carbon monoxide, because that basically degrades the life of the cell. Overall, for now, MOXIE just measures the purity of carbon monoxide and oxygen, and then it discards it. I mean, like besides basically measuring all the other things, as in like how much carbon dioxide did we take in, how much oxygen did we make, how much carbon monoxide did we make. Besides these, there are so many other sensors that continuously measures like the temperature, pressure, voltage across the cells, and so many other sensors. The idea of MOXIE is to not really see how much oxygen we made. The overall idea of MOXIE is to see how we operate, basically to learn how to operate the instrument. So basically, the idea is to basically, now Martian atmosphere kind of varies between night and day. So the idea is to kind of run the instruments between night and day, or different time of the day, or different, like within different atmospheric temperature conditions or atmospheric conditions, to see how to run the instrument and how to kind of make oxygen from there. Because for sending human mission to Mars, one idea, or again, like in context of MOXIE, the idea is you would basically send a MOXIE-like instrument. Now, here MOXIE is very small, but then the idea is to kind of learn things from this mission or this experiment, and then make a scale-up system of MOXIE, put that on Mars before humans are actually on Mars, and then you kind of have that oxygen ready for them before they even reach over there. So basically, you would want to have a MOXIE-like system to run continuously 24/7. That is just making oxygen and then storing it, and then so that when humans are there, we would have the required oxygen already on Mars. So I think maybe I can take a pause here just to see if there are any questions or before actually moving on to the next part. So, or if you want to discuss something, or like if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those questions right now. Or if you want, we can continue and then we can pause later as well.
We have a question in the chat, which is around how much power does this take? How much power does this system draw?
Yeah, so this takes around 300 watts of power. Now the thing with MOXIE is whenever we used to operate MOXIE, so now there are other instruments as well, other cameras, other instruments, and all the other things as well, and the rover drives too. So everything needs power. So because this instrument, the sole instrument, like the only this instrument takes like 300 watts of power. So this basically represents like majority of the power, or basically power stored in the battery. The rover is basically powered by the radioisotope thermal, the RTGs, basically, and then the battery is basically charged by the decay of that radioactive element. But then the idea is because this instrument takes most of the power, so whenever we ran MOXIE, we couldn't, or like the operations team, they couldn't plan any other thing. So the idea was we would run this and then use all of the power, and then by the time the MOXIE operation was finished or the entire run was finished, the rover's battery would be again charged back to where it was, so that it can basically continue the next part of the operation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Question: 800 degrees cent. 800 degrees is hot.
It is.
What's going to keep it from melting the rest of the unit?
Yeah, so that's where the gold thing comes into picture. So if you've noticed, this is all gold plated. So that basically keeps the temperature, basically like all the other instruments, basically prevents from all the other instruments to basically really get melted. And then I think at the bottom, or like the entire rover, I think it's like thermally protected. So that's basically keeps the other instruments safe when we are really heating it to 800 degrees Celsius.
We have another question in the chat. Can this be used on the ISS to purify air, like a scrubber, but better?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, because I think over here, though, it's really just an experiment. It's an experiment, and then just to see if we can really make oxygen, and then how to operate things on Mars. I think if we want to, I mean, like I'm just thinking out loud right now. So I think if we want to place a MOXIE-like instrument on ISS, I think number one, we will need to scale it further up, because right now all in all, we actually did total 21 runs, 16 runs of MOXIE, and we made 122 grams of oxygen. So now if you put everything into perspective, if you want to make, or if you want to keep a MOXIE-like system on ISS, then you would need to scale it further up. And then I think the power itself required to just run a system like that would be so much that I'm not sure like how scalable that's going to be, specifically on ISS. Or even, let's say, if someone, I mean, like I have basically gotten this question a lot, that can we use this MOXIE-like system here on Earth, just to make oxygen and then reduce the pollution? So again, like the answer to, like the simplest answer to that question specifically here on Earth is, it's really cheaper to plant more trees than to actually make a MOXIE-like system and then run it continuously and then make oxygen. I hope that answered your question.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
It's sounds like something like this would be great where where time isn't quite the factor, where you have a long time to generate, your oxygen.
Yeah. All right. So maybe we can move forward. Okay. All right. So here I've got like some pictures, like when like the real pictures of MOXIE inside the rover. So this is basically it's inside the belly of the rover, and the pipes. These are like the inlet gas pipes, carbon dioxide pipes, and outlet gas exhaust, and so on. And then it's along with inside the belly of the rover, along with its peers and like all the other instruments and computer and all the other electronics. This is where the inlet filter assembly is. So this is where the HEPA filter is, which basically takes in the carbon dioxide and then it passes the gas to the MOXIE. Now we also have a twin on Earth, which is also known as EM or engineering model, and I'm gonna tell the importance of that when we'll talk about the operations. But basically, the idea here is it's a twin of MOXIE, which is on Mars. Now, so before I jump to the operations, so this was the plot, basically the first ever oxygen we made on Mars. So it was on Sol 60, basically 20th of April 2021. This time here, so as I mentioned, like the overall run time is 4 hours. Majority of the time, out of 4 hours, majority of the time is basically spent just heating or heating up the system to 800 degrees Celsius. So from 0 to until this point, we just heated the instrument. And then when the temperature basically reaches 800 degrees Celsius, that's when basically we start collecting collecting oxygen, carbon dioxide from the air. And then the 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 representation of oxygen production is basically current. So when the flow of current represents the oxygen production. And in the first run, we made total 505.37 grams of oxygen. And then, so so that's the chart, basically the first ever oxygen on Mars chart. All right, so let's jump on to operating MOXIE on Mars. So before I talk about operating MOXIE on Mars, like a couple of terminologies like uplink and downlink. So uplink basically refers to sending data from Earth to Mars, that is uplink. Downlink is sending data from, getting back data from Mars to Earth. One thing you would notice here is in terms between the downlink, there is an orbiter as well. Now Mars has multiple orbiters. So most of the time, the downlink part, the rover basically sends the data to the orbiter, and then the orbiter then passes the data back to Earth. Whereas for uplink, majority of that, or I think what I know is for the uplink, that uplink happens directly from Earth to Mars. Primary reason for that is in downlink, let's say if you miss any data, you can always ask the rover to resend the data, and then basically you're not losing onto anything, because because there is an intermediate step here, the orbiter. But let's say if there was an orbiter during uplink, and let's say if there was some data lost between sending from Earth to Mars, so you don't know what exactly the rover is going to get. So basically, to reduce the chances of basically losing the data, or basically you want to make sure that the rover is actually getting the right data which it should be getting. Otherwise, you could basically risk the mission in danger as well. So that is the reason for uplink, it's direct communication from Earth to Mars. Another thing is one Martian solar day is called as one sol, and which is approximately 24 hours, 39 minutes, and 35 seconds. This actually picture here is taken by Curiosity rover, the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity rover. All right, so let's understand MOXIE operation now. The graphics or the charts I have here are in context of in general operating Mars rover, but then I'll try to explain it in context of MOXIE as well. So basically the way it works is for MOXIE, as I mentioned, so MOXIE is one of the instruments that basically, or MOXIE is the only instrument on the rover that basically took all of the power while it was operating. So it was obvious that we cannot run MOXIE continuously or 24/7. The another thing is there was no need for doing that because we are not really storing oxygen. So the idea was to basically find the opportunity, or let's say, and when I say opportunity, I meant that when for specific atmospheric conditions, let's say we want to see when the atmospheric air density is high, then let's say we want to run an experiment that what happens or how we operate when the atmospheric density is high, air density is high. So for that case, let's say we want to run MOXIE run in night time. So then we would take that opportunity, and then basically, and it was more of like negotiating with the science team and the operations team on like when we can get that opportunity run. So once we have that, once we kind of penciled down, oh, like this is the sol we are going to run MOXIE. So then basically what happens was like we would basically send the instructions to the rover at the start of sol, let's say around Earthrise. Then so basically the way it was done was you would have a bundle file that basically had not only the MOXIE instructions but instructions from all the other instruments. Let's say you have camera, or you have let's say you want to drive the rover, then you basically bundle everything in that one file, and then you send the data from Earth to Mars to the rover. Once the rover kind of receives the data, then it carries out the sequence of activities commanded in the plan. When I say sequence, so basically it was literally sequence. So let's say the rover, for instance, like for simplicity, let's assume that the rover kind of woke up at 8 a.m. Mars time. So basically we are telling that 9 a.m. you basically drive 10 meters. 10 a.m. you basically point the camera to this rock. 11 a.m. you start MOXIE. And then you run it for 3 hours, and like 4 hours it will just run. And then after four hours, then you basically, again, like let's say drive something or do something else. So basically these are the sequence of commands which literally like written in a script or per se. And then that sequence is basically sent to the rover. And then, as I mentioned, like the rover then performs all the sequences. Now, for sending the data back to the Earth, so now there are a bunch of orbiters around Mars. So basically, whenever the next orbiter basically passes, it's also programmed that like when the rover is going to send the data back to Earth, or via which orbiter. So then once let's say in this example, like the afternoon orbiter, when it approaches, then the rover then whatever data the rover has collected so far, it basically got sent from rover to the orbiter. Then the orbiter records the rover data and it relays it back to the Earth. And then the rover then continues to carry out the sequence of activities commanded in the plan. And then in this case, the rover may continue working at night, but most time it's spent sleeping to recharge the batteries. And that's where I'm like when like the MOXIE operations, or like whenever we ran MOXIE, like many times we actually ran MOXIE during night, because in night time the density of the air is high. And another thing was like the rover was not doing anything else. So we basically just took that time to really like just run MOXIE. And then again, like morning when the again like the orbiter kind of flew by, then the rover again like sent the data back to orbiter. It wakes up, it send the data back to the orbiter, and then the orbiter then gets the data. How does it look like for technical operations team? So I also worked on the operations part. I work as an operation payload downlink lead, where I was working on the downlink aspects of the operations. So for MOXIE as well, like we had uplink and downlink. So we had one team which was completely dedicated for uplink operations. So would basically verify all the sequence are correct, and then make sure that there is no issues or nothing else. And then they would basically work with the other, in general, like bigger Mars 2020 operations team. They are like were just working on the uplink, and then the downlink team was just responsible for basically getting the data from Mars, analyzing it, making sure that for your instrument, the instrument health is healthy or whatever it is, and kind of analyzing that and basically conveying that information to the larger operations team. So basically for the operations, so team basically reviews what was planned yesterday. Then we would also plan or basically do a high level plan for the next few days, and then the science context for today's decisions. So now going back to the downlink, so the in our example, the data was the orbiter. So basically the data that rover sent in the afternoon pass is relayed back to the Earth by the orbiter and received at the DSN. So DSN stands for the Deep Space Network. These are the a group of antennas across the planet to basically receive the data from the rovers and all the other orbiters and all the other spacecrafts. Um, Once the data is basically received at DSN, the JPL ground data system, it basically processes the data and then it assembles it into telemetry and basically housekeeping information like initial data products and so on and so forth. So DSN basically sends the data and then it processes, and then we get the data at the end. Now for the downlink assessment, now it was specific to every instrument or every other team. So now in context of MOXIE, whenever we received the downlink data, we then created some charts. So let's say for the first oxygen run or for all the others, so we had an intent, like what exactly we want to do. So now let's take an example of the first oxygen. Whenever we made first oxygen, so our first intent was, okay, uh, did the instrument run successfully? Were there any logs or were there any failure in the logs? Or so that was an initial assessment. Then after we got the data, then we basically processed the data and then we generated the chart to see if everything kind of looks as we expected. And that data was kind of more of like the research data, in a sense that um, we just did like the high level initial assessment of the data, and then we can then kind of continued looking at the data later on to see what we want to do next. And that basically refers here that we kind of produces that data products. Then the team reviews the science data, decide what the rover should do in this example, like a bigger picture when it wakes up tomorrow morning. And this was called as activity planning. This is kind of like a picture of like how the in general like the activity planning or like the sequence of the command look like. So for instance, like these are the sole events, and then all these here, they are like the different the times on Mars. So like for instance, like at this time basically you perform these tasks, or at this time you perform these tasks. Now again, like in the operations team, so once you already have the data and then you kind of make an assessment and you already have a plan for the next day, or sorry, the next sol. So that is get finalized, and then there you basically talk to the road planners and everyone in the uplink team, and then generate the uplink products, validate, make sure like there are no issues, and then reviews. And then when everyone basically says go, and for here everyone is like everyone from different instrument team or rover planners or all the other subsystems, everyone, when everyone says like go, for instance, let's say for MOXIE as well. So once we receive the downlink data, like the first log, we made sure that the instrument is healthy. Healthy in a sense that we ran MOXIE and then it turned off successfully. It means that if we want to plan MOXIE run tomorrow, then is it good to go or not? If there was an issue, then it means that MOXIE is not good to go. But then since there was no issues with MOXIE not being, for instance, let's say if that was a MOXIE instrument, then in that case, then basically the team would analyze what are the implications of that particular instrument if it's not in go decision. So based on that, and then behind the scene, then you would kind of perform all the analysis to see like why the instrument is not go, and then how to kind of recover or how to fix the problem, and so on and so forth. And once you have the bundle, then again, like the bundle file containing everything needed for the next soul plan is sent directly to the rover from Earth to Mars. This is a chart of how a typical MOXIE run process looks like. So basically, first we start with intent on the run. So for instance, as I mentioned, like let's say we want to see how we want to operate during, let's say, night time when the atmospheric density is high on Mars. So that intent of the run is defined. Then we develop MOXIE run sequence. By MOXIE run sequence, what I meant was, so there were 3 steps I initially mentioned, right? Like one is we heat up the SOXY to 800 degrees Celsius, then we start collecting carbon dioxide, and then that's how we kind of produce oxygen. So this is all the sequence. So this is sequence is like first you have the compressor, and then you run the compressor, you turn on the compressor, then you turn on the compressor at different speeds. So that's all the entire MOXIE run sequence look like, and these are different steps. And steps as in like, let's say you run it for 10 minutes, you run this step for 10 minutes. Then once that is done, then you perform another step for, let's say, 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes, and so on and so forth. And at the end, then once the run is complete, then basically you want to send the data from MOXIE to the rover's computer as well. So everything is kind of laid down in one run sequence. Now, before really sending the data to real MOXIE on Mars, we want to make sure that the sequence we kind of design does not break the instrument, because if it breaks, then you are done. There is no way fixing it. So we have a Simulink model, or Simulink, like a very simpler term. It's like a digital twin of MOXIE, like a software model of MOXIE, where we ran once we developed the sequence, we kind of made sure, basically ran the sequence through the software model to make sure that everything runs fine. We don't run into any faults or anything like that. Once that is done, then the engineering model, so the one I showed, like the picture I showed in my previous slides, where there is engineering model like a twin on Earth, so then that was run on that as well. Once after that, there is a flight software test bed, then the sequence on run on that too. Once all of that is basically validated, and we kind of agreed, overall the team as a team agreed that okay, this sequence look good, the charts, the look, everything looks good, then the sequence is finalized. Then we look for the available slot based on the intent. An available slot as in like whenever we can run MOXIE on Mars. Then the sequence is delivered to MOXIE, to Mars uplink. Then it runs on Mars, and then we receive the data from Mars downlink, analyze logs and data, and then we repeat the process. So there is tons and tons of data. So we want to make sure that we analyze the data and then see like what do we want to do in the next run. So that's how the typical MOXIE run process looks like. Total, we did 16 runs from 2021 to 2023. So MOXIE project basically concluded in October of 2023. The overall goal was with MOXIE project, the overall goal was to basically run MOXIE for 1 Martian year, which is equals to 2 Earth years, and then made at least 10 grams of oxygen with 98% purity. And that was all basically achieved very earlier. So all in all, we did total 16 runs. We made total 122 grams of oxygen, ran it for total 1213 minutes, and the average was around 6 grams per hour. Again, as I mentioned very earlier, that the goal here is not how much oxygen we made. The goal here was to learn how to operate the instrument in different conditions, uh, day, night, different temperature condition, like high density, low density, day, yes, I'm sorry, like whether it ran in time of the like night or day, and so on and so forth. Uh, One more thing here is, if you notice, there's a microphone over here. So I actually like wanted to add a slide for the microphone recording as well, but in past, like whenever I tried sharing the audio, it never worked. So that's why I did not add a slide on that. So I will actually post a link for that. So basically, the rover had different microphones. So one of the microphone that basically recorded the sound of the compressor. So whenever we ran MOXIE, there is a compressor inside the MOXIE that basically takes in carbon dioxide. So the microphone basically recorded the compressor sound. That's one for kind of more like for like doing like further research purposes. And then another thing was like an outreach perspective as well, because it sounds really cool that you have a sound which was recorded on Mars, and it's a compressor. Like, how does it sound like?
Piyush,
That's
on that previous slide, sorry, just a quick question. The durations here, are those exclusive of the warm-up time? Is that just when the compressor is running, or is that the whole run?
Yes. So duration is exclusive of the warm-up time.
Got it.
That's correct. Yeah. MOXIE in general received a bunch of group achievement awards from NASA, but this was the main one. We all received for the Mars 2020 MOXIE Science and Operations team for basically paving the way for future human exploration for Mars with the first demonstration of ISRU on another planet. And it was also mentioned as one of the best inventions of 2023 by Time magazine. So just like to pick like a couple of the main ones. And that's it. That's with this, again, like, thank you so much for having me, listening to me. And I will actually post some links I have already created, and we can do questions if I can find how to basically add a chat. Yeah.
Piyush, could I just ask you, the amount of oxygen that's required for, let's say, a human would be a fair amount more than what's been generated so far. So how would you, what would the scale involve? You know, what would the plan be for that?
So there is already research going on. So like, so MOXIE program in general, like, had different partners, like Oxyon Energy as the basically the company kind of worked on fabricating the cells. So I think here I don't exactly know like the scale in general, like how much like scale up we need to do. But you're right. I mean, like, this is, so to give a perspective, the first oxygen we made, that was around like 5 grams. That was enough to basically keep a dog alive for 10 minutes. So even like if we make like do a cumulative sum of like total 123 grams of oxygen, it's very less, and we will need to like scale it like more further. There was already like research going on to like how much we scale and how to scale. That's going to be, and then what are the different factors that will be basically involved in scaling up the system. I'm sorry, I don't have like the exact answer to your question, but I can point to like some of the resources.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just wondering whether it would involve either just keeping the conditions similar, but running the instrument for a longer period of time, or whether you actually have to build up bigger instruments.
Oh yeah. So to that answer, yes. So the idea over here is, let's say when we are really like talking about human exploration, like human missions to Mars. So I think the idea over there is you would like, number one, like you would need to like scale up the system, and even after scaling up the system, you would need to run the system continuously for a couple of years so that it can actually generate that much oxygen, store it, like liquidify it and then store it, so that like for the human mission, when humans are there, then you would have that sufficient oxygen primarily for coming back. Because again, like for the life support system, I think you can still take that much oxygen, but again, like since you already have the system, then why you would take it? But then that's not the whole point. The whole point is basically for coming back, because you would need a lot and lot of oxidizer just for basically propelling that rocket, like that from trip, like the return trip to Earth.
Thank you.
I think I'll stop sharing my screen. All right.
So there was a question in the chat around if CO2 splits to CO and O2, what happens in combination to result with both? Louise, I think that was your question. If you wanted to maybe clarify what you're looking to understand.
Yeah, okay. I'm not a chemist or so I have, if you're taking one bundle of CO2 and you're splitting it to get oxygen, which is O2, and you still have CO around there someplace. I mean, it's not CO3 that you're splitting. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand, and the mechanics from what he's saying seem to be quite complex.
So yeah, so to answer your question, so what happens is once you have carbon monoxide and oxygen, the gases again, like these both carbon monoxide and oxygen are again like send it back to the atmosphere. Now in the atmosphere, you still have very, very, very traces of oxygen. So basically, and you also have the traces of CO. So basically what happens is the CO and O2 again like goes back and mixes with the oxygen and eventually again becomes carbon dioxide. So that's
so it enriches. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a recycle type of thing.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. I remember hearing about this sort of thing using ice found on Mars, or even ice found on the moon, to make both oxygen and hydrogen for fuel to come back. Is this a step between that, or are you just not going to do the ice thing at all?
Well, MOXIE has nothing to do with the ice thing. You are right, like because the Mars, like the polar caps have like a lot of ice, right? So one idea was to basically melt that ice and then basically make like hydrogen and oxygen over there. But again, like over there, like number one, like you would need like a system that basically first you need to basically melt that ice. So to answer your question, like the MOXIE, those two are like different, like mutually exclusive things. So this has no connection with that, but that can also be like one of the ways of actually making oxygen on Mars. But the idea with MOXIE was, or I would say like the one leeway or advantage of with MOXIE is you already have the carbon dioxide there. So you don't have to basically dig anything, or you don't have to create that resource to create another resource. You already have that resource. All you're doing is you're just taking that resource and simply converting it to oxygen. Did that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, it's excellent. Thank you.
If there's no other questions, and I had another question. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what your role was on the downlink team. What you did with that.
Yeah, of course. So I actually, in general, like in the downlink team, I worked as a payload downlink lead. So as a payload downlink lead, what you do is I was basically whenever we ran MOXIE, whenever we got the data. So there are as a part of the data, there are two type of data we got. Like one are the logs, the instrument logs. So basically, really analyzing the instrument logs, and making sure that the instrument, or in this case MOXIE, did run fine. And when I said fine, as in, like, let's say if you were supposed to run at 11 p.m., then basically you, in the sequence of the logs, you would kind of find that, oh, did the power on sequence did get sent from rover to MOXIE? That was one part. So basically analyzing all the logs. Number two was the data. So once we got the data, so basically as a part of receiving the data, so basically work with the ground data system to download the data, making sure that we got the complete data. So now this goes back to the slide where I was telling about like how downlink works. So basically the rover sends the data to the orbiter, from orbiter to Earth. So there were instances where, let's say, we did not get complete data. How did we know that? Because we already knew the size of the data we are expecting in download. So for instance, let's say you are expecting a 2 MB worth of data file. However, you just got 1 KB. That clearly shows that you did not get complete data. So in that case, you would basically then work with the operations team to kind of request the data again. So that was, so as a part of the downlink, like the downlink operations, that was like the overall part, like analyzing the logs, making sure that you are getting the complete data, then also splitting, well, not splitting, then doing the data analysis. So we had charts and everything, and then reporting back to the bigger operations team with the status that if MOXIE is healthy or not, if what do you want to do next, and then that's the overall status. And again, like for MOXIE, the operations was like very unique because we never ran every day, as opposed to the other instruments. For instance, like one of the instrument is MEDA, that basically it's a weather station on Mars, like which is instrument on the rover, which continuously collects the weather information. So instruments like that, or cameras, so it's a lot different, like operations routine, because those instruments run every day, and then they would need to get the data every day and then do the analysis every day. Another part of the the part was the data, or not just MOXIE data, the entire rover data is available freely, publicly, on the planetary data system, NASA planetary data system server. So I've added a link here. That's the number 3 in my chat. So one part was to kind of process the data. So now we have the raw data, which is in the binary form. Then you calibrate the data to kind of make it human readable. And then there were some derived data where, like, let's say you have like some derived like predefined quantities. So that was the overall part of the process. But the data processing part, or publishing the data, it was not time constrained. So as a part of the downlink, you were basically really like restricted to, let's say, 1 hour time, where you need to do the assessment and then let the broader team know what's the status of the instrument.
Wow.
So
That's really cool.
it was pretty interesting. And like for a couple of months, and almost like for 3 months, like the entire team basically did the operations and basically worked on the operations in the Mars time, to kind of get a hang of it. So when I say Mars time, like literally Mars time, so basically you would have all the meetings. Now the Mars day, as I mentioned, like it's 40 minutes, approximately 40 minutes longer, right? And that keeps on changing every day. It's not just 40 minutes today. So let's say if rover, let's say if 8:51, for instance, 9, you are starting the work tonight at 9 p.m., you would start 40 minutes later tomorrow. So that was the another challenging and pretty cool part, was to kind of live the Mars time, where and all the meetings were in night time, and then people used to sleep in the daytime. So it was fun as well, but then that actually disturbs the sleep cycle too.
Sure. Wow. That's wild.
Yeah. So in, like, for the resources, I have actually pasted some links, like the Mars 2020 mission in general, images from Mars 2020, MOXIE data is, again, as I mentioned, like all of the data is available freely, publicly. And then I have also shared a link that basically for sound of MOXIE's compressor, like whenever we recorded the compressor run, so you would basically hear the compressor basically sound like going up, basically when we increase the speed, and then going down, and then when the speed was stable. So you would kind of notice that as well. And then 2 links of the first results paper, and then the link 5 here is like the entire MOXIE paper. So if you really want to kind of, if you want to kind of know like the entire subsystems of MOXIE, so that would be the paper you would want to looking at. And I thought of adding one more link to the current resource. So that research that Pat mentioned. So the idea is we can use MOXIE for exploration of Venus. So that's like a concept study. And there is an interesting podcast by MOXIE PI, Dr. Michael Hecht. It's a combination of both like MOXIE and like the EVE project. So it's pretty interesting to watch.
Great. All right. I mean, if we don't have any other questions, then Piyush, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to
Yes.
present to us. This was very interesting stuff. Very cool seeing what this technology can do, and learning all about the you and the team that made it happen. Very cool. So thank you very much. If there's nothing else, then we'll
thank you so much for having me, and you all have Happy New Year.
yes, Happy
Yes,
New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
All right, we'll end the meeting then. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.